All right, so Shane, thanks so much for jumping on the call here today. What I My understanding is, and just forgive me because obviously I'm kind of jumping in here in the middle. Just my understanding is that you've seen a house, you really like it, and you'd like to get an offer in. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And just give me a couple of points of background on it. How comfortable are you with what it's listed at? What's the listing price, by the way?
It's listed at 530.
Okay. And so it's listed at 530. And just so I'm clear, you don't have anything to sell before you buy this. There's nothing really in the way of you making an offer at this point.
No, there's not. I decided to get a small mortgage to bridge the gap between what I need and because I'm going to sell it as soon as I move in.
Okay.
So I did talk to Shane's lender, and so I'm going to do a very small mortgage, and then put down, a lot of cash as much as
Okay.
I can. It's also above my original budget. I
Okay.
had originally said 475, but just looking around because I'm so specific of what I want at this stage in my life, I want what I want. And I realize that that's just probably not going to happen unless I do work or I'm more aggressive when I do find something. So I started to wrap my head around the 500 mark. And, and now I'm above that again, but I am comfortable with it because I do have the ability to do it. And so I'm willing to go for it.
Okay. All right. So what I'd like to do here, Shane, thank you for that background. What I'd like to do here is I want to kind of walk you through the main points of a real estate offer, which ultimately turn into a real estate contract, so that you have a comfort level with the decisions that you're going to have to make. So there's a series of decisions that you're going to have to make around how you'd like the offer to be submitted. As I'm walking you through it, I want you to know that you don't have to make these decisions right now. We actually have a window of about 48 hours. So we've got about 2 days before there's a deadline for the offer to be submitted. But these are the primary things that you're going to have to get your head around in order to decide how you'd like for me to represent you when we submit the offer. Does that work for you?
Yes.
All right. So the first and most obvious one, which we already sort of talked about initially, is price. You've got to decide what your comfort level is on the purchase price. Now, the property is listed for 530, and as you've already indicated, it's perfect, right? This house is perfect. It's got everything that you're looking for. And a house like this is highly likely in this market to sell for over asking price. That is pretty typically what we're seeing for properties that come on the market in this condition. So I just want to prep you for the expectation that a serious offer on a property like this would probably be expected to be somewhere above what the current asking price is. Now, everybody wants to ask me, okay, Matt, how much above? And the real answer is I have no idea. And I'm saying that with total candor because the truth of the matter is that what the seller is going to accept is going to be a combination of the best price and the best terms. So as we move through talking about the other terms that we're going to put in the deal, it will inform whether or not you need to be more aggressive on your price or less aggressive on your price. But what I could tell you is your decision has to be based on how comfortable are you with the number that you're offering, because there is always a probability or a possibility that someone else is out there that may make a higher offer. But you'll never know if they are. And so you simply have to make the offer that's best for you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So in this scenario, the asking price is 530, and really all I want you to do is just get your head around, would 530 the right price? Is 550 the right price? Is 560, 570, whatever that number is, it's the right number as long as it's a number that you're comfortable with. And if you don't get the property and it's a dollar more and somebody else gets it, you would feel like you put your best foot forward. That's the best way for you to think about pricing, okay? Now, part of pricing is also what kind of a deposit you want to make on the property. Now, you've already mentioned that you have a plan to get a small mortgage, but a portion of the down payment that you put on the property is going to have to be a deposit. And this is an earnest money deposit that gets put down at the time that they accept your offer. So you don't have to write a check until they actually accept your offer. But in a property like this, it would be understood that probably a 10% down payment or deposit would be enough money that you wouldn't walk away. And remember, the purpose of the deposit is to give the seller confidence that what you're putting down isn't a throwaway money that if something better comes along, you're just going to disappear. And any reasonable person would agree that you're not going to walk away from $50,000. So my thought would be that if you can get comfortable with a $50,000 deposit, that would probably be the right number. Is there any reason that that wouldn't work for you?
No,
Okay. All right. Great. So as you start thinking about pricing, and a $50,000 deposit, the next thing that we need to talk through is how you're going to pay for the property. Now, this one I want you to understand is essentially a scale, and it's a sliding scale. And what the sliding scale looks like is risk to the seller and risk to the buyer, and a combination of where's the money going to come from. So on the one side of this scale is an offer where you as the buyer have all the protections and all the rights to terminate the agreement based on whatever you want inside of the mortgage contingency. Now, in a typical fashion, what you would be allowed to do is indicate to a seller that you're going to get a mortgage for a specified amount at a specified interest rate. And if any of those terms change, either due to an appraisal not coming back at the right price or due to the fact that situations change in your personal life, due to the fact that interest rates move, if any of those conditions change, you would have the right to terminate your agreement, walk away from the deal, get all your money back with no penalties to you. So that's on the one side of the scale. All the way on the other side of the scale is no risk to a seller, and no risk to a seller would be cash. So a purchase where you were buying the property with 100% funds that were already available to you, contingent upon nothing else. A seller would say, wow, I have no risk here. And the buyer has all the risk. Now, we're in a situation where you're going to be somewhere in between because you're going to be putting a lot of money down, as you've indicated, right? Which how much are you thinking is going to be your total down payment? How much are you going to put down?
like 300.
Okay, great. So
Yeah,
so
300.
so you're going to put 300,000 down, which means that you're going to finance somewhere between 230,000 and above in order to be above asking price on your offer. So your mortgage is going to be somewhere about $230,000. Now the seller isn't going to have any problem getting all that money from you at closing because the money's the same at the closing table. But the issue that the seller might have is that if you put a traditional mortgage contingency in, it's going to be subject to terms and conditions that they have no control over. And so that represents risk to the seller. So the risk would be, of course, well, what if the house doesn't appraise? What if I don't get the total amount of money that I want? What if something changes in your personal life? And a seller in a multi offer situation, they basically want to have as little risk as possible. So for you, the opportunity would be to present your offer in a way that makes the seller the most comfortable possible in order to get your offer at the top of the pile. Now, one of the options that you have to do that would be to waive the mortgage contingency. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not getting a mortgage. It just means that you're telling the seller, I am getting a mortgage. I am getting these terms. You're even disclosing how much you're getting, but you're effectively saying, and if anything changes along the way, I'm going to remove the risk for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. This is going to be my responsibility. So if the house doesn't appraise, I will come up with the difference. If the property doesn't, if for some reason interest rates change, that's not gonna change my mind. I'm still gonna go forward and purchase the property. So to understand what your options are here is on the one hand, you can make a purchase with the full mortgage contingency protections for a buyer. You can waive the mortgage contingency or you could pay in cash. So those are the three things that are likely to be presented to the seller. In your situation, it seems likely that if you were to waive the mortgage contingency, you would probably give yourself an advantage in the offer. The other thing to remember is that on the scale of risk, because you're borrowing very little against the total value of the property, your risk is really mitigated as a potential buyer, because even if those terms change, they're not likely to change the outcome of your approval. Does all that make sense to you?
Yes.
Do you have any
Yeah.
questions about it?
Um, so in other words, if the house doesn't appraise, at that point, I would be responsible for covering that difference. Which it sounds like wouldn't matter much because I have the cash. Is that accurate? Like it wouldn't jeopardize my mortgage amount if I just had the cash, or I would just add to my mortgage? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, effectively, exactly right. So what it's not going to change the price of the property. All that would change would be and it really wouldn't even change in your scenario, the amount of money that you're putting down. You'd still be putting the exact same amount of money down. It's just that the way that your mortgage is set up, you may wind up borrowing less of the loan to value on the property. So the mortgage company would just adjust what the borrowed amount is versus what the down payment amount is. But as long as the property appraises anywhere near what your offer price is, we wouldn't have a real problem unless this property appraised for under $400,000, which is never going to happen. So this is a very, as I pointed out, a very mitigated risk for you as a buyer.
And we're probably gonna get to like inspections, but like I know that that's an option, but could it, but is that gonna affect if I have no mortgage contingency? Like, am I allowed to do that if I don't?
Yeah, the two things are actually separate. They're not really related. So the mortgage contingency and a home inspection are two separate parts of the agreement. But that said, I'm glad you brought it up because that's the other thing, and that's the third sort of primary decision point that you have to make. So on a property, any property that you buy in the state of Connecticut using the standard purchase and sale contract, which we're going to put your offer on, there's a section in it, which is section 17, which outlines your rights for home inspection when you purchase a property. And that's the longest section in the contract because it has the most teeth in it, and it has the most portions of the deal that you need to pay attention to. Now, here's the tricky part. It's also the riskiest part of the deal for a seller. So on a purchase, basically, any buyer that is buying a property with a with an inspection contingency has a right to terminate the agreement effectively for any reason. If a doorknob is loose, they're allowed to not buy the property. They can ask for whatever they want in order to get a renegotiated sale price. And buyers that are making offers like that in the current market represent a big risk to a seller. So, just like we talked about on the mortgage contingency, I want you to think about the inspection contingency on a scale. So, if you were to make a purchase on a property, and all the way on one side of the scale is all the risk to the seller and all the rights to and protections to the buyer. And on the other side of the scale is all the risk to the buyer and all the rights and protections to the seller. In this current climate, there's a couple of things that you need to know. And I want to make a point here that's really important. It gives me no joy or comfort in explaining this. And one of the things that you need to hear me say, I'm not encouraging you to waive any of the things that you feel you need. That's not the position here. But part of what I am doing is at least giving you the information you need to make a decision about what you're comfortable with. So here's the delineation there is that what I want you to understand is many offers that are submitted in this market have waived home inspections, have waived mortgage contingencies. And I understand that there's risk there, and I don't want you to make that decision if you're not comfortable with it. So here's what you have to understand about the inspection. In a traditional model, you make a purchase and you get an offer accepted. And prior to 2019, it was very common for people to purchase homes. And when they purchased the home, there would be a 10 to 14 day inspection contingency window where any buyer could go in and check anything and bring contractors in and open every door and check every outlet and run the dishwasher and make sure that everything was working properly. Once we got into this current climate, this current market, savvy buyers started to change the way that they made offers. And the way that they did that was by offering to purchase properties as is. Now, you may have heard that term before. Have you ever heard the term as is?
Yes, yes, I have. Is that when you just take it no matter what's wrong with it?
Yeah, that's right. So what would happen is savvy buyers recognize that in order to give themselves an advantage in the market, what they would do is they would make an offer and they would tell the seller up front, it's my intention to purchase this property no matter what I find out during the home inspection. Now, an as-is purchase still allows a buyer to purchase to conduct a home inspection. And one of the preserved rights in an as is purchase is that a buyer still has the right to terminate the agreement if they find anything or the aggregate of things in the purchase that they no longer want to move forward. So what happened is sellers would accept these contracts as is, presuming that there was an agreement up front that the buyer was going to move forward no matter what. But sometimes buyers would find things during those home inspections and they would enact their right to terminate. And they would go to a seller and say, hey, I know I told you I was going to move forward with the deal no matter what, but I found that all the doors don't close properly and there's a buckle in the deck, the floorboard. So I don't want to buy it unless you give me $10,000. And so the negotiation would reopen. Now, what that led to was even savvier buyers said, you know what? I actually mean it. I actually mean it when I say I'll buy your property as is. And the only way for me to give you confidence around that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is to waive the home inspection entirely. Now, this one always freaks people out a little bit. So just give me a moment to sort of walk you through what all this means. When you waive a home inspection, it literally means you're going to buy the property and you are not going to inspect it for any deficiencies. Now, that is obviously a big risk, and it's something that you have to be really comfortable with. My years of experience have put me in a position to give you a little bit of guidance around it, but again, you've got to make your own decision. Now, I haven't seen this property, so here's what you need to understand. The main things that you're looking at through a home inspection, the biggest ticket items, which is not only, these are not the only things, but they are the things that you have to, at least in your mind, be comfortable with, are the major mechanical structural systems of the house. There's no perfect home inspection ever. Most home inspections come back with a list of 10 to 100 items that are on them. But most of those things are usually sort of out of the grab bag of a leaky faucet, an outlet that doesn't work, you know, a doorknob that doesn't close properly, some little things like that. But the big ones, and these are the ones that I need to make sure that you're okay with if we're going to waive the home inspection. The condition of the roof, all the major mechanical systems, which include your heat, your air conditioning, and your hot water, your electrical system, your plumbing, and any exterior septic or well. Those are your big ticket items that are the ones that we really want to have confidence if we're going to waive a home inspection that we're comfortable taking on any risk. Because there's no guarantee of anything ever. But if you're going to waive a home inspection, those are the ones that would be the big surprises that nobody would really want to take on. So,
Hey Matt,
based,
is the septic separate? Do I get a separate guy if I decide to do septic, or can I do just some of the inspection, not all of it?
you can choose to do whatever inspections you need in order to be comfortable. So the short answer is yes, you can have a septic inspected by a septic inspector and a well inspector that can be separate from the primary home inspection. In fact, you can even set your home inspection up to say, hey, I just want to inspect the electrical, the plumbing, or any specific mechanical equipment. Keeping in mind that anything that you inspect, however, is always going to represent a little bit of risk to the seller. Now, most sellers are reasonable and they understand that certain things have to be looked at before you purchase. But it's my understanding that this particular property was built in 2019. Is that right?
Yes.
So we have a relatively safe risk in assuming that those major mechanical systems are probably still within their life expectancy of useful years, right? The roof was probably gonna, probably at a minimum a 20-year roof. Typically, you see a 30-year roof going on, which means that it's inside of its warranty. The heating, venting, air conditioning are probably all still new since the house was built in 2019. Your plumbing and electrical had to be up to modern building code per 2019. So it's a fair bet that most of the things that would come up in a home inspection of this property would likely be along the lines of some of those smaller cosmetic and or minor repairs. So if you were to waive a home inspection, you would be understanding that you're still taking on all the risk of those things, but you're mitigating your risk with your knowledge of and understanding of the condition of the property. So that's the third primary decision point that you've got to get to. So just to quickly summarize, you've got to get your head around what you'd like to make as an offer. You've got to get clarity on how comfortable are you with the mortgage and the mortgage contingency and whether or not you're in a position to waive the mortgage contingency. And then you've got to get really comfortable with whether you want to be somebody who stands out amongst a crowd of other offers by waiving your inspection contingency. And the only place where I can tell you that you have to have comfort level around this is that, again, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that in this climate, it is likely that some of the other offers that you'll be competing with will do some of these things. So with that said, the only other thing that we need to figure out is a closing date. And when are you thinking closing would work for you?
Well, it doesn't matter to me. I'm flexible, so I don't know what you need to write, but I can do, 30 days or, if she needs more time, that's fine with me.
Okay. All right. So, well, the best thing to do then is since you're flexible, we're going to just say that we need 30 days at a minimum because we do have to get you through the mortgage process, but then at the seller's preference, we'll close after that. So we'll put in a 30-day timeline. So as soon as 30 days, but anytime after that would be fine with you. That gives the seller as much confidence and flexibility, and it's a very, very strong offer. So ultimately, all I really need you to think about is where you'd like to land on a pricing standpoint. The last thing that I do want to mention around pricing is that there is a scenario where you can use something called an escalation clause. So now I know that you're really enthusiastic about purchasing this property, and I know that I guided you toward making a strong offer. But there is a way for you to hedge that a little bit by using something we call an escalation clause. Now, an escalation clause says that there's a minimum price that you're going to pay no matter what. And that in this scenario, let's just say you were going to make an offer at 550,000. You would say, I'll pay 550,000, but I'm willing to go up to whatever the top number is for you that you are absolutely committed to paying and not a dollar more in increments of $5,000 over any competing offer. So now what happens in that scenario is if you make an offer at 550 and someone else makes an offer at 570, but you've put a cap on your purchase price at 600, you would actually get the property at $575,000. Now, there's some risk in this. Some sellers don't like the use of an escalation clause. They think that it's tricky. Other sellers are fine with it. At the end of the day, I think it's a great tool when you're making an initial offer in order to show your willingness to be flexible up to a higher price. Now, it is possible that we may hear back from the buyer or from the seller that they don't want the escalation clause included, and that just may change how we present the offer. But for a tool as part of your initial offer, I think it's a solid strategy to help you get to a higher price.
Now, will you ask them before you put it in case because then we'd show all our cards, right? So will we know ahead of time if we should do escalation?
Well, I love the term show all your cards. You actually have to show all your cards. That's how you actually win a deal in this market. Is like the standard. This is keep in mind that if we were in different market, we would be in an active negotiation where we would show something and they would show something. But in this scenario, this is the moment at the end of the poker game where everybody says, show your cards. And so in order for us to have our best chance, that's actually what we need to do. We need to show them what we're willing to do in order to be the offer that gives the seller the most confidence that they're going to close, the most money in the transaction, and the ability to look at us and say we're the strongest offer that they've got. That's the way this works. And if we hold anything back, somebody else might go all in, and we might say, but we were willing to do more, but we might not have a chance. So your best bet is now's the time. You put everything on the table and you see if you can get the deal.